Shout out to Omnis. I was gonna ask, what's the difference between being stuck and going through a shift? How to know the difference without disrupting your flow and attraction? Celestial rising, divine noon, and grand night to the divine mirage watching this mindful message. It's your divine reflection, divine messenger, and we are back with another observation. I got 11% on my iPad, which is cool, but basically, if you choose to and you enjoy these videos, make sure you like, comment, subscribe for more divine messages. And I want to make sure I hurry up to where my iPad won't die because I want to keep going back to this question. But I'm going to go back to where I can just egotistically digest the question so where we don't have to keep going back and forth on this device that has a death date, which is kind of crazy. But I was going to ask, what's the difference between being stuck and going through a shift? Being stuck is going through the shift. Because the thing is, for you to shift, you had to go through a period of being stuck in your thoughts or being stuck in and the thing is too, to be stuck, the ego has to think as if it's stuck somewhere. But where are you stuck at? You may say your environment, your predicaments, your personality, your characteristics, your way of living, your need to be somewhere in life as far as like a destination or as far as like a predicament of where you are experiencing your life into being in. That is the shift right there. By knowing that you're not really being stuck in what you want to shift yourself into being. Because the shift begins when you stop being stuck in what you're already stagnant into not being stagnant in. And so how to know the difference without disrupting your flow and attraction? So to know the difference, you have to realize that the difference in attraction is attracting and what is not being stagnant. You have to always, because remember, the mind is weakened by the power of what you love to love on. If you love being stuck, then you'll be stuck in the vibration. Right? So, you gotta remember, being stuck is a ego resisting change. We can only be stuck because the ego does not want to change itself. So the ego does not want to change itself, then what do we expect to be? We'll be stuck. If the ego does not want to change, we're going to always be stuck. Now remember, you are that change. You are that change. But in order to be that change, what do you got to do? Be the observation that's shifting the change. When you do that, when you are observing the change that was resisting itself into changing through the shift that you were observing, you now are observing yourself rewrite the path. When you rewrite the path, you now stop resisting the path that was changing and the shift that you were never stuck in. You being stuck in that path is the reason why you couldn't rewrite the shift into finding out what had to be changed in the path that you already shifted into. Remember, you shifted into the path of observation. That's all life can be anyways. The observation that you think you can't shift. That's what being stuck is. You're thinking as if, or you feel, or you know that you're stuck. But what are you stuck in? Besides the observation that you can shift. You can shift that change, but remember, it hurts to change. So if you don't want to change, you remain stuck. Because now your ego's resisting that shift. If the ego resists change, there is no shift into changing. If the ego resists change, there is no shift to change. The ego will feel as if the shift is that change that you are comfortable being in. And the thing is too, being stuck is a vibration of unconscious repetition, but a shift is conscious recalibration. We have to recalibrate ourselves into being free from being unconscious and repetition. Because remember, a shift becomes conscious once you become free and what you were not being stuck in. Being stuck is unknowingly going in loops. So there's somebody right now who is going through a constant loop of, let's say the summer, for example. So it's July, whatever, July 17th and July 18th, but they're constantly going through, let's say, summer school, or they're going through a low number in workers or consumers for their work, or just people who are employees for the job. So a lot of people are getting laid off. A lot of people just got so many different things going on to where they feel as if what they're doing is not destined for what they should be doing. But they don't know how to break free from that ongoing loop. And the thing is too, it's unknowing. They don't know that they are stuck. But the thing is though, you can only be stuck in that being. If you're being stuck, then you're stuck. Because you're still unknowingly going in loops of the mind. But when you shift, now a shift is your system, because we all have our own system that we are enslaved to or that we are controlled by. But when you are able to now shift the control of the system that you are now not imprisoned by, you now are being restructured by your awareness. Your awareness can now rebuild what you weren't stuck in because you're building a better shift for yourself. The shift happens when you build a better happening. Because what is happening? You're not being stuck anymore. That's the restructure of your shift. Because your awareness will now help you be able to build what you were already being in. Because the being of restructure is the basically the awareness of what the shift broke the loop in. Once the shift breaks the loop, you stop going into the unknowing because you're aware of what the unknowing is. But that awareness came from you now restructuring the system that you were conditioned into being stuck in. Once you stop being stuck in that system, you are now able to restructure your awareness in that system. Because that system formed your awareness by their structure. But when you structure your own structuring, you now build your own foundation to start from the ground up. No handouts. Being stuck protects the ego, but a shift will disrupt this. That's why being stuck is very dangerous. That's the difference right there. Let me make sure. The difference between being stuck and going through a shift, and how to know the difference without disrupting your flow and attraction. Because the thing is too, the flow of attraction comes from shifting your stuck ways. Your awareness, your abundance. So to answer that question, the difference without disrupting your flow and attraction, the flow of disrupting or not having disrupted attraction goes from being attracted to what you're attracting yourself into flowing in, but not being disrupted by the flow of being stagnant and what you had to let go of by not being resisting in the change of shifting your mind. So my iPad dies, we already answered that. Okay, but the difference between being stuck and a shift. They are both the same in their differences. The same thing in their similarities is their spirit, but their differences come from the labeling. Being stuck protects the ego. It protects you. But a shift will disrupt protecting you. The shift does not care about the mask that you wear, which is exactly why stuckness will let the identity be safe in safety. That identity is a safety net, because there's somebody out there who's going to college and they say to themselves, well, my parents can pay for this and I don't got to worry about that. That's their safety net. But when all else fails, when your parents don't have to, or when they necessarily can't pay for your way of living, you have to now find your own source of income. You got to figure out what you have to stop being safe in by not being safe in safety. Because remember, a conscious shift threatens the false mask into making room for higher projections. This shift right here, consciously, does not care about your identity. It has to move no matter how you feel about this false mask. This has to shift regardless of what you put on every single day. Because remember, you are wanting, when you want to be aware of what you want to move into, you're now making room for higher projections. Those higher projections can now sit with you because you don't identify with being stuck and this vastness of being stuck in the vibration. Because remember, you consciously will disrupt what the ego wanted to hold on to. You stopped caring to be stuck. The ego says, where we are right now is complacency. I enjoy it. I want to be around that. But you say to yourself, that's not what I want to be in. I don't want to be in that shift, so I'm not going to be there. But the ego says, why don't you want to be in there? Why don't you want to be stuck with where we are right now? You know, for example, somebody can be stuck in their job and they know as if their job is not helping them get better. But because they don't know where else to go, they're used to now being where they went to when they had nowhere else to go from the beginning. That's what caused them to be trapped. But that conscious shift will tell you that, you know what? I gotta threaten what you masked the beginning into wearing. The beginning of what you worked on became what you wore every day. Now, when it's time for you to shift, I don't care how you feel, ego. Remember, this comes from this. That's that bridge. This says, I don't care how you feel. I don't care how they feel. I'm going to threaten how they feel by doing away with what you were wearing. Because what you wore requires you to feel a certain way about me coming in the establishment. Now that I'm stepping into a different season, you don't want me to come into the season to help you see what you are wearing? No, I got to make room for what you're seeing yourself wear. For the future, not the present. When you're being stuck, you now fight with time. Excuse me. But when you're shifting, you can now transcend the timekeeper. There is no time, but we have a timekeeper. So who's keeping track of time? If it's not you, being a timekeeper, keeping track of time. It's just that simple. We don't have to sit here and go into the ethereals or the celestials to tell you what a timekeeper looks like, because those vibrations of higher timekeepers have no shape or form. You put form into their experience by shifting your consciousness into what you're fighting with. When you fight with time, you now lose track of what you got to transcend. Which is exactly why, if someone is stuck, they can be anxious about progressing in life. Because progressing in life requires time. That's why they feel stuck. Or they'll say they are going through being stuck, because they're anxious of what they have to progress into. When you're progressing in life, it gets scary because now you feel as if you have less time to do what you want to do. But that's a shift right there. When you're going through a shift, time will slow down. From experience, that's why I had to put that down. Through experience. When you're going through a shift, every day, you slow time down until what it can't speed up. Because remember, you're now showing yourself the depth of your alignment. When you're swimming down to the deep end, you now see how deep your alignment was showing you to be. That shift showed you what you had to dive into now. Because by you being stuck, you were only, like you had a life jacket on and you were just swimming in the shallow side or the surface level of life. So when the deep end came about, you would look down there and you would put fear into what you couldn't see because it was too dark down there. But you said to yourself, you know what? If I'm going to go through this shift of progressing in life, because to progress in life, you have to go through that alignment. But that alignment requires you to now drown yourself. Spiritually, of course. When you drown yourself with what you now realize that the things that are slowing you down, where's the top at? The things that are slowing you down are telling you what you have to be aligned with. That's exactly why you have to slow down life. When you're slowing down life, you're saying to yourself, what should I be learning from this standpoint right here? I had to stand still with a test of being timed. So I'm keeping track of that time by showing myself what I'm not stuck in, by being someone. When I'm now not being anxious by being someone, I can't be stuck by being what that someone cannot be. Because now I'm going through a shift, and you realize that shift because you're able to now slow down the awareness of what you show yourself progressing into being. Because you're being progressing through the depths of alignment. Because now the alignment can say to itself, I'm connecting with what I used to stand on. But I cannot stand on when I'm swimming and learning my swimming lessons in. So when that happens, you now, being stuck can delay your reality, but it can also shift you into realigning with it. Being stuck can delay your reality, but a shift just realigns it right here. Being stuck comes from what you are placing your delayed reality in. Because when you delay time, you get stuck in it because you're being stuck in that delayed time by what you put a shift and reality into. But that's the thing though. You can realign with reality because what is it? It's the ego. You can realign with the ego by vibrating with the reality that goes into the alignment that you're not stuck in. Because remember, when you are progressing constantly, that's the message for today. Start progressing. All we can do is progress in life. When you're progressing, you can't be stuck. Because remember, you are now recalibrating your unconscious repetition. Because you shifted that repetition by being conscious again. So when that happens, vibrations of stagnation can postpone what you should face. But shifting frequencies bring unseen perspectives in your sight to help you sharpen your signal. So now, when you're sharpening your signal, these vibrations are not stagnant no more because you basically postpone what you were afraid to face. So now that you're facing it, all these postponed events in your mind that were keeping you stagnant, they no longer can reside at that radiation anymore because they're poisoning themselves. You now say to yourself, by me shifting frequencies, because I want to do so, I'm now getting the gift of the unseen realms, bringing them into my life from an unseen perspective, because now you're thinking away from being stuck in your ego because you see what's in your sight. When you put something in your sight, you can now help sharpen the signal that cannot dictate what your sight looks like. The signal to shifting consciousness has no way of seeing itself, but you become sharp in that sight by telling yourself what you have to do by shifting a higher reality into what you don't want to be stuck into. That goes with anything as far as a job, family, relationships. All that comes down to is being observing what you were never stuck in. That's exactly why when you feel like you're not doing or being where you want to be, you have to ask the vibration of stagnation, why aren't you shifting? What is it that I have to shift? You know how to take accountability by asking yourself, what is it that I have to start working on? And if you don't have an answer, that's your answer. You're looking for the answer. No, you sit with stagnation and then you shift it. You got to shift it. Stagnation cannot shift itself without your guidance. You are the guiding or the guidance for all labels that are resisting change. That's why you are the shift making change that is rewriting the path of what cannot change in observations. Observations don't want to change, so you became that change that was born into changing yourself into what was always shifting into never being stuck in itself. Have a great and divine day, Divine Reflection.